quick start. Oh, yeah. All right.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
To the audience through reasoning and logic, things get a bit complicated. Because now you have your position, you have the facts or evidence you want to present to support your position. In order to help the reader connect these two things, now you're using reasoning. You're trying to show them how they connect in a way that will make them agree. This is how we use logos. This is how we use reasoning. Well, obviously, there's not just one way you can do that. And we talked about this before. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning. That's when you're taking something specific in order to reach a general conclusion. Something specific to general. Specific to general. And we went over that. Specific, general. You remember when we did that. The other way is deductive. The opposite. You take something general and you turn it into something specific. This is a favorite way for authors to use logos in convincing someone. And you have heard this way used a lot, this deductive way. There's an actual word to describe this way of using logos, and it's called syllogism. It's that scheme of taking something general, a general case, and using it to come to a very specific conclusion. I'll give you a really good example. This is basically how the argument is. And you probably already heard this argument, especially in Western media. The general case is they try to present that all terrorist acts are caused by Muslims. To come to a specific conclusion. If you're a Muslim, then that means you're a terrorist. That's logos. So this is what we mean by taking a general case to come to a specific conclusion. So this is nothing new. We've already talked about this. So this is what we should already be clear on. I don't think this is the difficult part of our discussion. But those are the payleads. Those are the appeals. However, that's not where it stops. The second element in a rhetorical strategy, the second element in a rhetorical strategy, the style. The style are tools the author uses to present the information in an argument. Now, the minor element are specific aspect of the strategy. This is how the author presents the information in the argument. And here are some of them. This is not all of them. For sure, this is not all of them. The list goes on and on and on. But some of them, maybe you've heard it before. Syntax, diction, tone, details, imagery, figures of speech. We can go on. Paradox, metaphor, so forth. Well, that's figures of speech. Paradox, so forth and so on. There are many of them. There's a long list. And at some point, you will get a longer list of these. Or of this. So this is what we mean by tools. Now, all authors have to use those three appeals when presenting an argument. We know that. But when it comes to the styles, when it comes to the tools, that is up to the author. Some authors may use tones, some may not. Some may use details, some may not, so forth and so on. This is what creates the author's style. The style of writing of the author. This is what creates it. Their use or their not use of these tools. If you want a longer list of these tools, you already got it on your computer. All you got to do is type it into the browser. That's all you got to do. You can put style and tools, hit enter. I guarantee you get a list of one of these. It's not something that's very difficult. All right, so let's talk about syntax first, since it was the first on the list. Syntax, of course, we're talking about sentences. Remember in first quarter, we went over syntax. Sentence structure, we went over that. Sentence structure, grammar, so forth and so on. Short sentences, sometimes authors use this. Abrupt, intense, confrontational, force of sudden stop of thinking. When an author uses short sentences, this is what they're trying to achieve. Long sentences. Our author, Henry David Thoreau, as we already know, loves long sentences. That's a key. That's like one of the most obvious tools that Henry David Thoreau uses. Is long sentences. He loves those long sentences. And he uses them very effectively. Parallel syntax. This is like a train gathering steam. This, and this. Remember when we went over parallelism in first quarter? A list of items. Authors like to use that parallel structure to add a climax to what they're saying. They give you a list of things. Henry David Thoreau, he does this a lot. He loves to give you a list of things. At the end of that sentence, he wants you to understand what he's trying to say. Overwhelming the reader syntactically. You don't just give him one example, you give him a list of examples. So there's no more talk at the end of that list. No more talk about whether or not that's right or not. So these are some examples of what we mean by syntax. Definitely dealing with the organization of the words. Also in syntax, we have rhetorical questions. Those are those questions that we ask. We don't necessarily mean for the reader to answer them. However, when we answer the rhetorical question after we ask it, we're manipulating the reader, showing the reader this is the answer you should have, or you should have had. We talked about this particular tool when we discussed how to write the essay. Remember we said in the introduction, start with a question and then answer the question? Yeah, that's a tool. That's a style. I say you had to do it. It's not like required. Some writers will do it and some won't. But that's, with an argumentative essay, that's a good way to start the introduction. With a question and then you answer it. Well, that is a style. Repetition, repeating over and over and over and over and over and over again. Repeating the same thing over and over again. Repetition, that is also a good way to provide some emphasis on something. Just repeat that point over and you want to hit that point home over and over again so the reader can really understand it. This is really important because I've said it 3 or 4 times. Now let's talk about diction. Diction, word choice. This is word choice. What words did he decide to use? The actual words. Negative, positive. Obviously, if it's an argumentative essay and he's trying to get the reader to disagree with something, whenever the writer talks about that thing, he's probably going to try to use some negative words. Always negative words. Never associated with anything positive. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get the reader to not like it. When I was your age, if there was ever anything in the news about Russia, it was absolutely negative. Anything about Russia was negative. When I was your age, they were the boogeymen. They were the terrorists. They were the ones you're supposed to hate. So everything in the news about Russia was absolutely negative. You hated it. Even if they did some amazing thing like landed some probe on Venus, you know, it had to be something negative about it, you know. And it was hard at first. It blew up and then it came back together and landed. They lost contact with it, and then they finally. I mean, anything negative, you know, it's small. Whatever it was small. It wasn't big. It was small. If they did it, it was small. Or it was ugly. Or it was anything negative. That was it. So they used those negative words. You never saw in the media, beautiful and Russian woman. No way. They ugly. They look like men. What are you talking about? This is how it was. Because they wanted us to hate Russia. They still want us to hate Russia, but it's kind of hard now. You got the internet and stuff and all that. And Russian dash cams who haven't watched those videos. It's harder now, but they still try. So when an author writes about something and he wants you to agree with this thing and disagree with that thing, he's going to use positive for this and negative for that when in his word choices. Tone, the tone of the author. We're not talking about how well he can sing here. We're talking about whether or not he likes what he's writing about. So an author has to, put the tone. Whether he's serious about what the tone has to be serious. If he likes it, it has to be something, it has to have a positive tone. If it's sad, it's going to be a sad tone. This is reminiscent. You think about back in the day, it's going to have a reminiscent tone. This is one of the styles or tools an author uses. Details. All details. Details. Some authors, like Henry David Thoreau, love details. Tell you the detail, all detail. They describe the little thing down and how the snow hung and how they did that. I mean, details you didn't really need to know. However, it does clarify how it looked. What was it like to be in the woods around Walden in the wintertime? See, it gives you a lot of details. How this looked, how that looked, and how it was. Hit this way, went that way, and it looked like, he gave a lot of details. This helps in the explanation, obviously. Figures of speech. Now, I know you all in here have heard about figures of speech. I know your English teachers in the past spent many hours trying to get you to understand things like metaphor and simile and all that stuff, right? And you got it. I hope. Word or phrase that describes a thing in terms of another thing. I know you heard that before over and over again. Yes. Metaphor, simile. Metaphor, simile, symbol, personification, paradox, hyperbole, hyperbole, and oxymoron. These are just a few of the figures of speech, literary device terms that you should have been familiar with before today. For sure, at least. If not, paradox, hyperbole, and oxymoron. Personification, for sure. Okay, you went over, even in first grade, you had to go over a little story with the little bear and the little mouse, and they were acting like humans. Personification. Giving inanimate or non-human things human attributes. You remember this stuff, right? Okay. It's in symbol. This thing represents something else. Yes? The teenager is like a wall. The teenager is a wall. The teenager is the wall. Because like talking to him is like simile, metaphor, so forth and so on. Authors definitely have to use this when they're trying to get you to understand something. I can't really think of having an argument where you don't use one of these. How can you have an argument where you don't lose at least one of them? Right? Yes? Yes? Yeah. You got, you got, okay. All right, so there are figures of speech. You have to look for patterns. When you're trying to identify the figures of speech, in what an author has written, you have to look for patterns. You have to look for patterns. So here's some questions. If the author overuses it, now listen to what I'm about to say. Just because an author uses figure of speech once doesn't necessarily mean that is the best example of his style. Now, in the redesigned essay question, it said the most relevant features. Relevant means the one he used the most. Just because he did it once doesn't mean that's his style. And it may not be a good idea to use that as an example in your essay. Now, if he did it a few times, now we're talking. This is a really important point. This is where your reading comes in. You can write an entire paragraph of an analysis on a particular powerful metaphor, symbol, or allusion. But he had to use it before in order for you to be absolutely sure this is a very relevant feature of his style. And that's just a bit of advice from me to you. But on the same token, if you want to just mention he did it once and you want to use that as an example, go with it. That's fine. Just go with it. However, the best option would be to use the things he used a lot, or he or she used a lot. Okay, so when we're dealing with figures of speech, you're trying to figure out whether a writer has used that tool in what has written. These questions are pretty good, are an example of some questions that you should answer while reading. Go ahead, Miss Laura. I'm not going. Go ahead.
No, it's a mistake.
Oh yeah, show me where the mistake is. I got a lot of them.
There, certain, it's supposed to be THERE, not there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good eyes. Okay. Imagery. Henry David Thoreau uses a lot of imagery. He has to put us there. It's not enough for him to tell us he was there. He wants us to be there also. Now, yes, this is his style, but this style is not unique to him, especially when writing about nature. Nature writers, they have to put you there. It's not enough that they were there. They want you to be there also. So they're going to use a lot of imagery, language that appeals to the senses. They want you to hear it, smell it, see it, feel it. They want you to experience it, not just read about it. They want you to get lost in it. If you haven't had that experience while reading Walden, you haven't read it. You just looked at it. You just looked at it. Because for sure that was one of his intentions. He wants you to be there. He wants you to know what it was like to be at Walden then. Because he had a funny feeling that Walden is not going to be the same 100 years from now. So he wanted the people who read this 100 years from now, let me tell you how it was when I was there. And you can see whether or not it's the same now. That's what he wanted. One of the first environmentalists. So if all the trees were cut down, he wants you to know the trees were there. This is how they looked. This is how they sounded in the wind. This is how they looked in fall time. This is how the snow looked on them when it was winter and it snowed, so forth and so on. So that if you go there now in the winter and it snows and there are no trees, you're like, well, man, what happened to Walden? This is why he used a whole lot of imagery. And I don't think it was figurative. I think it was all real. He wasn't just doing it just to give you a figurative image of how
In Islamic school. We'll talk about tomorrow.
Yeah, that's rolling the hard way. We don't want to roll quite that hard. We want to get one of them little minibuses.
What's up?
Tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Everybody's gone out of their mind.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class. Welcome to Mr. Quick's class. Welcome, Mr. Quick's class.
Oh, yeah. All right. All right.